We're going to pull the engine out of this Jeep. The reason why we're doing that is it was out splashing in some water, got some water ingested in the engine. We think that it's hydrolocked. We don't see any holes in the engine block, but we're going to go ahead and pull the engine out and go through it and see what the damage is.
Brian's Mobile One.
So when you're going to pull an engine out, or if you're even going to do the cylinder head, you got to get the oil out, obviously, to diagnose the thing in order to drop the oil pan and see what direction you need to go. You got to get a map. You got to know what you're doing before you get going. That's part of that. Getting an engine out of an automatic transmission vehicle can be tricky because you have to get to these bolts on the flex plate, and you have to be able to rotate this around to get to each and every one of them. So in order to do that, you have to pull the backside support of the oil pan, and pulling the oil pan doesn't hurt, and it gives you a sneak peek. On this engine, that sneak peek revealed a bent connecting rod. That'll seize up an engine. Look at the oil pickup, and it's got chocolate milk dripping off its lips there. You look in the pan, it's just got all kinds of sludge. So it may have some main bearing failure. The engine's seized. Splashing through the mud puddles, just busting it along on a dirt road, and the engine just stopped. It wouldn't turn over. I got into the flex plate there, tried to crank it with a pry bar. It just will not budge for anything. So it might be seized up main bearing or rod bearing or something like that. With the aid of my amazing karma, I was able to get to these bolts for the end cap and get that pulled off. And from there, I was able to tap the piston up with the backside of a hammer handle, and I was able to get the engine to rotate enough to get the flex plate bolts out. You have to drain the coolant because you've got radiator hoses and all that, and you got to clear the radiator. You also got to get the coolant out just because everything else that you're going to be doing, if you're going to be pulling a head gasket or something, you got to drain the oil and do the coolant, because when you do the head gasket, things are going to mix. You don't want them to pool in the bottom, congeal, and create a similar problem. So that's what we're doing. Pistons only come out the top. In order to get the connecting rod, we got to pull the piston, so we got to pull the heads. So I've got the bolts pulled here and here. I've got radiator hoses pulled. I've got the whole oil pan sitting in an oil pan, along with the pickup tube, like the little snorkel that sucks the oil up. That's sitting in there, and all the bolts, I've got them in baggies. For example, this one says oil pan and 2 nuts. It also has the bolt for that pickup tube. You can see it right there, the big sucker. So this is the upper oil pan. So the pickup tube goes on first, and then the upper oil pan. And then I've got the lower oil pan in separate bolts. They're clean and they're all uniform. If you lose 1 or 2 of these, it's a pain in the butt. It's so much easier to just throw it in a bag and label it. This is the flex plate. I got a bunch of starter bolts and all that kind of stuff, and bell housing bolts and other bags. I always think, if something happens to me, I want the next guy to be able to put it back together, basically. So it sucks having to pull an engine that has so much grit and mud and dirt. Let me show you the exhaust on this. All those splash guards that are just stupid extra weight? They keep your exhaust from being completely covered and insulated in a blanket of hot rock massage, dirt, and grit. So anyway, it sucks working on Chryslers already because their plugs are garbage, but then when you fill them full of fine grit, it's even worse. So one thing to consider when you're pulling an engine is to get all this crap off first and then take things apart. This exhaust is going to stay in the car the whole time, but these bolts are going to go, so I got to clean all that off and then get some compressed air and go through some of the fasteners. When I'm pulling fasteners off of a Chrysler, because of these stupid red tabs, you have to get a pick and push the lever over and then push it through. If it's full of dirt or grit, it's not going to come out. Even if they're perfectly clean, these things are ridiculous to get undone without breaking, just because of time. Over time, the plastic breaks down because the material they use sucks. The design is half-baked, it kind of sucks, but when you couple it with bad materials, it's BS. That's what I'm dealing with. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the intake manifold. Once the intake manifold's off, then I'm going to address some of the other stuff. Exhaust manifold's got to come off this side. Best case scenario, I can pull just the cylinder head and there's no damage to the engine block. The block doesn't have to come out, and I'll be able to just pull this one and that one. So that's the direction that I'm going to take, because either way I want to pull this off before I pull the engine. And if I don't, how the crap did that cap come off of there? Gas is expanding. You can see I cap everything that I can to keep it clean. You can see that this one also is capped. Dude, it is a battle. Like young teenage guys that like to go mud bogging and mud puddling or whatever, It's fun, it's worth it if you don't mind dealing with the aftermath of the dirt and the grit and the crap in your face. I mean, if that's cool with you, great. But for those of you that have somebody else work on it, bear in mind there is costs involved because this slows the project down and the desire to work on the project down considerably. So think twice before you go mudding, and before you tear something down. It's not a bad idea to power wash the crap out of everything. It's already happened with, I mean, if water's getting into the engine to hydrolock it, water's also getting into all of these spots too, so bear that in mind. Have fun. Just know that you got to be rich to play some games. You see the two shiny spots here and here? Pull those bolts out first, get the coil off of the plate. Once the coil's off the plate, you've got a bolt here, 13 millimeter, 13 millimeter, 13, 13. And then you can pull the bracket up and off and just stow it like that. You got these big long bolts going through the ignition coil. If I'm pulling the whole intake, I don't worry about pulling that bracket off so much till later. In the meantime, I've just got this tucked down out of the way. Just remember when you put it together, you got to get that laid out first. As far as the fuel lines, we say fur instead of for in Utah. I don't know what you guys do where you're from, but we're just thankful for everything that we've got. Shove this guy onto the line and then up in there, and it'll cause the spring to release here to get over the little lip, and then you can pull it off the rest of the way. Safety glasses, wear them. I'm just covering the harder stuff. So once you get this one undone, then you can move it forward or backward in the harness and get the other one undone. Get it to hang off. You can see the quick disconnect tool back there. And then as far as this goes, this will pull off. You can disconnect everything from it at that point, but you got a line that goes to the bottom of it, which is this guy right here. And then this one goes here, and then this part goes into the front. You see that there's a nipple there and a nipple there, one in the bottom, one in the front. So once all that's undone, you can slide this out of the way for the most part, and then just worry about those other lines here in a minute. And I should be able to leave this here. You just have to be careful with these plastic lines. You don't want to break one. It's worth whatever it takes to be careful and protect it, or get it out of the way or remove it if you can, so that you don't have to get a new one from the dealership. Any trip you have to make like that or order it in some stupid thing, you want to avoid that. And they have to be hard. They're fragile because they're plastic, but they have to be hard because they handle vacuum. They can't crush in or implode. If you kink them, then that happens, or they crack. Yuck. The crux of all of this part is this EGR pipe going from the intake down to the exhaust. I've got both sides undone. I've got the really coarse thread wood screw type things into the plastic here. Got the ones down there undone. And it's blocking over the top here because there's a bracket. There's a nut that holds on this bracket that holds these, the metal pipe and the plastic pipe for the evap and the fuel pressure line. I got that handled. The nut for that sitting right here. But then to get this one is really tough. It's a 13 millimeter ½ inch. So what you gotta do is get a wrench in here, and then I'm using a rock climbing maneuver for climbing cracks to get this to crack loose. It's a crack trick, right? So I get my hand in there, I get my other hand on here. I put them back to back, so I'm knuckle to knuckle, and then just imagine they're both there, and then I just flex my hand and make a fist, and it makes them expand. It's like the jaws of life or something. I've got one hand here, the other one pushing on the battery, and I just kind of to get them to go apart. So just imagine Napoleon Dynamite doing the butterfly thing with two hands. So you put your hands, one on the wrench here, and the other one against the battery, and you just kind of like that. You'd be amazed how much force and expansive whatever you can do. You can hold your whole body weight by doing this in a crack. Once all that EGR crap's out of the way, by the way, the EGR valve lives clear down back here. If I throw a flashlight on it, you'll see it. It's like clear back there. So it goes from there. They just didn't have anywhere else to put it. You see a lot of stacked engineering or Play-Doh engineering, you know, like a ball of Play-Doh, more Play-Doh, more. Isuzu and Chrysler are the worst for that. Once all that's undone, you can see there's one more bolt that's on the back side. We're going to get that with the 10 millimeter ratcheting wrench, and we're going to poach it from back in this corner. Then this will come off. We got the upper intake manifold off. You don't have to pull these if you want to leave all the injectors intact. That makes a lot of sense. But you do got to pry up all these little pine tree body pin fastener things for the wire harness to be able to get it to sit up and out of the way. Once you've done that, 13 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, and then you can just take it and pull it out like this. You will spill a little coolant. Have you ever seen a V configured motor, V6, V8, that was that steep? This is one steep motor. Being steep, there's a yin and a yang to everything. The beauty to this is all that dirt that was in here that I was so worried about that piles up in these spots runs right down this gasket thingy and winds up there. A bunch of that powdery wire harness crap that came off from here did the same thing, and then I just blow on it and it goes right out the back. It's really nice. But the downside to having it be so steep is that the gasket failed. It was leaking coolant, so I had to tear all this down anyway to chase down the coolant leak that was leaking out from the top of these things. You can see when I wiggle this, there's still water in there, or coolant in there. I need to find out where to drain this down the side. There's a block still full of coolant, like all the cylinders and stuff. But we're getting there. I think that once we pull this manifold off and pull the valve cover and the cylinder head, will come easy after the manifold's off. We'll be able to see if we need to pull the engine or not. Either way, this gasket's getting replaced. That's a good thing. So far, by the way, we're into this. If we don't count fixing all the plugs that we have to fix or chase down or repair, we're into this thing: a head gasket set, some fluids, and a piston and a connecting rod. Piston connecting rod's about $200, $220, because it comes with a connecting rod and everything. And then the gasket set, I think, was another $200. We're into like $400 or $500 is all. Of course, I'm just talking about the parts involved. Man, we are almost there. So the question a lot of you are going to have if you're pulling in the engine is there a bolt at the top, or is there two, or what? Chrysler always does two at the top, and I can reach in and feel. There's a little bit of a shelf, but I have to reach as far, and I can feel the head of one of the bolts this side, and then go on the other side. I got to go over the top of the bracket that holds this. So the metal line that you have here that I'm wiggling, it's tagged in with the other bolt. So you need to go with your a wrench on the back side here to get that off. So I've got access to all my head bolts. If you look down here, half of them are on the bottom side, the other half are elsewhere. You can see the broken off exhaust stud that we had before. I've been soaking that. I'm going to see if I can get that to go while it's still bolted on. That way it's holding on like anything with all those head bolts, and I won't have to wrestle it on the bench quite so bad. So I had to take one of the spark plugs out to give myself range of motion to move in a circle, and then I was able to get this thing to crack free. Did not want to come at first. You can see the evidence of that in the dents and the threads right there. But once I got it to turn a little bit, it came the rest of the way out, no sweat. One of the things that I used, extreme green penetrating lubricant. This thing lubricates the crap out, top-notch, high-pressure lubrication, and it does creep pretty deep. You won't see this on Project 4. I ought to send him a can of that, have him test that out against the other stuff. It shines, it does good. This right here is where you drain the engine block from the coolant, and then the oil dipstick tube, it's a 13 millimeter. This is another one of those crux things that's a little bit tough with the motor mount, at least for assembly. So I pulled the heat shield that goes here. There's a bolt here, 13 millimeter. There's another stud back there. There's a 15 millimeter nut on that. That's socket size. And then there's a little plug right there, but it's a 1/4 inch Allen socket. So it's just right above your knock sensor. Knock, knock, who's there? The rest of the coolant hanging out in the engine waiting to piss everywhere. So we're gonna drain it out. So get your socket in there good, get your drain pan underneath of it. Long extensions tend to rob you of all kinds of torque. We've got contingency plans for that. I'm gonna just hit that one, just let that creep, and then hit the other side and come back to it. You can see the other one's right there. You don't have as much issue with the exhaust. There we go. As you do the dipstick that gets in the way. To get the dipstick out, the rubber grommet or O-ring down there makes it hard. So you just push up on it with a little piece of metal or wrench or something on the end. Pop, comes out. Say nothing says screw you, come off. It's like adapting at the very end and putting something on a 1/2 inch drive on a Milwaukee fuel. If this doesn't come off, it's going to be because the block broke or some other dumb thing. Or it strips the middle out. Either way, something's gonna have to give. The thing is so stuck. Okay, so it destroyed the socket. Point is, we put all of it that we could. I really wish they would just frickin' use some anti-seize on those. It's idiotic that they don't. Oh, piss. That means that the head's loose. Here we go. So you got all these connecting rods and whatnot that are just sitting in there. I just pull the head off of them and then worry about getting this all back on later. You can pull all the top of the arbor de levantes, that's Spanish for tree of lifting or rocker or whatnot. Camshaft should technically be the tree of lifting, but there's a little culture for you. Looks like there's a lot of rust, but the valves were generally okay. Didn't see anything smacking because they were closed. That's what made the pressure for it to bend the connecting rod. Let's look at the block. So how many cylinders got water in them? This one's got rust. This one has a lot of rust and water sitting in it, but it didn't bend. This one got messed up, and that's something. It's almost out. I should be able to tap that up and out just from the bottom. This is what the cylinders look like after, or tops of the pistons look like after just wiping them off. Where this one had the rust and the water activity, the water and the carbon don't mix so good. The water takes out the carbon. People use seafoam, they put it in the intake, and it just knocks out the carbon, cleans it up. See how bad these were initially? I got a little bit off of that one. This one got a little, this one got a lot. You can use water in the same way to steam clean, but guess what happens if you put too much too fast and the engine can't keep up with it in terms of combustion and clearing it? That's right, you would hydrolock your engine. That goes with either one. Either water or seafoam, you can hydrolock an engine. So I've got the other head pulled off. This is actually the one that had the bent connecting rod. It's actually the one that had the most water in it. See, it was pretty full. This one still has muddy water in it. It's not coolant. Coolant's orange makes it tricky, but that's definitely a marked difference from the coolant that came out of this one. Lots of decarbonizing on the back cylinder, and it doesn't want to move at all. And I think a lot of that has to do with how much rust there is on the cylinder wall. So we've got a little rust, a little shine, a little clean on that. This one is just kind of blah, but full of water. It's got some significant rust. When I unbolted the connecting rod from this one, I turned it over and you can see the scrape marks on that. This one's never been any higher than what it is. So I need to punch that one up and out and through, and then I can address the rest of this and see if I can get the stuff to turn over. For reference, the other side, look how clean it is. I mean, it's very clean. This one was a nasty mess in the back, but apparently when you suck in water, it all goes to the back first. So I wiped this down a little bit, but you can see that it's just a mess. I wonder how much one pass would have cleaned that up. As you look in here, you can see that's water. You see it's like just puddled water. That's not coolant. It's clear, more or less. That came into here from here by pulling the cylinder head off. So that was really full. Interesting. So the best way to clean, I'm going to go into guns for a minute. An M1891 Mosin Nagant canoe paddle gun, big old Russian sucker. It's like AK-47 on steroids, but bolt action rifle, 30 caliber round. But think of this as history. Don't think about frickin' politics and all that other crap. You're missing the point. But the rounds are corrosive, and the corrosive rounds can cause the barrel to do this. And they say the best way to clean the barrel is to just shoot it. So the best way to clean these is probably to rotate the engine over. Anyway, really excited to be this far into this job. Be interesting to get the rest of this thing out. If you want to see the bolts on the back end, there's a bracket. You can get to everything really easy to pull the engine now. Everything's out of it. Pulling the block, I think, is the way to go, just because everything is so skinny. Unbolting the block from the mounts, like just pull them directly. Seems like that might be the thing to do. It's straight up and down. There's a little bit of undercut to it. I think I am going to pull the block just because it's going to take some honing and whatnot, but we'll just have to see. Overall, things are promising that the block isn't broken or snapped or busted up, and that everything was holding water is a good sign too. Nothing's gouged too bad. Well, this is how it came out. The piston ring has really chunky, crusty rust on it. You can see a bunch of stuff flaked out. It did not want to come out very easily. But it did come out. What is that? I mean, it looks like it's broken, but it's just crust. It was just, I was plowing through all that rust and stuff. Overall, I don't think it looks too bad. That should hone right out. As far as being bent, that's the first time I'm looking at it. I saw it from this angle. It was shaped like an S. It's amazing that didn't break. But look at that. That is really cool looking. Amazing that didn't go through the wall. Low RPMs, I think, helped a lot. But anyway, these are broken. You see how it's like snap surface? So you can see the little marks where I tried to get that centered as I could. Can you imagine trying to center that as bent as that was? My concern was that it could foible or fail one way or the other. And that's actually more than just probable. It's got to happen. But looking at this, it looks really, really good considering. I don't see anything really to write home about in terms of damage or scoring at all. It just had to plow and chisel all of this garbage off. Really good news there. I expect this one's going to be bent and this one's going to be bent also. We'll have to tear this down. I think I am going to pull the engine block out. I kind of don't have to, but I'm kind of just going to do it just to make sure that we do this right. Well, it's later than I care to admit. I had to run for parts. These head bolts, if you want to find a bolt to go in the block for pulling it, these are 11 by 15, 1.5, 11 millimeter. Good luck finding that. Anyway, we are ready to pull. Everything's loose and free. We're starting to take the transmission with us. So that's when we know we need to go forward a little bit. Here's what clearance looks like. I have plenty. Here's the drain that didn't, right there.
Bonus footage at the end. It's a 5-mile pass. There's snow. There's deer tracks. This canyon is cool. This is one of my favorite things about motorcycling. It gives you that leg up into an area, and then you can get off and hike and play and do all whatever else you feel like doing. It's awesome. Not sure if I should be hiking during my fast. Haven't eaten in like 30 some odd hours, 36, 40 hours. I've had water. I'm gonna see if I can go like 50 or 60 hours, no food. It's funny, the first 24 is brutal. It's really hard, you're really hungry. Lots of cravings, lots of automated decision and movement to go eat. Then after that comes clarity and a peace. And you just feel good. Calmness. You don't feel any no ire, no aggravation. Just chill. Feels so good. Plus you feel skinny and light and young. It's like, then you just ask yourself, why don't I do this more often? For one, save money on food, save time not having to eat, but above anything else, you just feel good. This is so cool. I love doing stuff like this. I used to do this a lot as a kid. All growing up, this is where I wanted to be all the time. charge. I'm just going to fabricate something and get it done. Look at that. That's freaking sweet, dude. You got all the way up on top of that rock. Get some music playing again. That is sick.